Hello and welcome back to this damn Fatalistic Crusade. This video is a review of Warner Archive's essential Blu-ray of Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the first theatrical feature made off of the Batman the Animated Series. Released to theaters Christmas Day 1993, it was pretty much dumped out by Warner Brothers' theatrical division after originally being designed as a direct-to-video feature, which did cause a number of hassles, but did mean the production got more money and more time to play around with, but also had to worry about things like theatrical aspect ratio, theatrical marketing, building a better, more robust theatrical sound mix in Dolby Stereo, and other hassles that meant it wasn't just the original DTV as planned. Now, the film was made after the first season of 65 episodes that started in 1992, meaning that, again, it got the Christmas Day 1993 release for a very short, limited time. That meant with the lackluster, pretty much non-existent marketing, the film was seen by very few. Critics didn't see it, audiences didn't see it, and it came and went very quickly and was discovered once it hit video like it originally planned, leading a lot of people to regret that they didn't see it or review it. Most famously, Siskel and Ebert actually featured it on their show when they got to look at the Laserdisc edition, which I've got behind me here. That takes me in a little bit to the aspect ratio debate, which Warner Archive has actually addressed on their release by including both main aspect ratios and an actual opening text note explaining why there are two different ratios. But essentially, the film was designed as a direct-to-video feature, meant pretty much originally for VHS. The Laserdisc was an added bonus. It was animated and designed just like the shows in 4:3 for standard television dimensions, which is what we got on the VHS tape as well, in addition to the 4:3 DVD option. But since it got earmarked for theatrical release and got more money, that meant they had to go with a 1:5 ratio when they started animation. So they had to hurriedly, all the producers and the main show team who were all working on this film, essentially as like a giant episode in between seasons, they had to very quickly run through with a 1:5 frame and make sure everything worked. So the 1:5 presentation gives a more theatrical grandeur, of course, but it is, obviously not what was originally intended. Some shots are a bit cramped. It is obvious when you look at the 4:3 framing, everything is laid out much better overall. However, the widescreen framing, it has a grandeur, it has more of a scope and a scale to it that I can't help but enjoy. So I've always watched the film in widescreen. I did see it theatrically. I was very young, so I only have fleeting memories of it, but I remember seeing, Batman in a theater, and that, we had to go because it was Batman, and it was in the middle of the animated series, so I was only a couple years old at the time, but I do remember, that there was Batman in the movie theater, and I remember little flashes, but again, unfortunately, I was too young to really remember much more than that. So it was over time when I would see the film on cable, on television airings, and then started renting it over and over and over, and then got my own copies, that I was able to fully just sink myself into it. And I think this is a film that the cult following really develops over multiple viewings. It's not just Batman fans, it's not just hardcore comics fans recognizing how much of a true adaptation this is, but also how it sticks in the mind and how it lives and breathes over time. And again, successive viewings, it enriches the story because you've already gotten the mystery out of the way, and on the second, third, fourth, fifth viewings, you're much more able to sink yourself into and really bask in the tragedy of the story, because this is a tragedy. And of course, all of these elements are not at all what a children's film is typically viewed as. This is not really a children's film. This is, without a doubt, the best Batman film ever made. The one that gets to the core of the character in its truest sense, and the spirit of the film, as developed by Alan Burnett, was to be essentially the last temptation of Batman, which is really what the film is. Right before the beginning of Batman's crime-fighting career, after Bruce Wayne has spent his entire life preparing for these things, the notion of something coming into his life he didn't expect, that he could potentially have a normal, happy, fulfilled existence and not be Batman. It's a fantastic idea. It's something that people have toyed with a little bit here and there before and since the film came out, but never to this degree, and never has any film adaptation or any adaptation outside the comics gotten Batman's character and the world of the Bat mythos and the world of Gotham City so tonally accurate. And again, this is a film that just grows over time in the mind. And it really is the perfect distillation of everything the animated series tried to do and did so beautifully. But they didn't have the constraints of broadcast standards and practices. They didn't have the constraints of 22-minute episodes minus the credits. And, you know, even if they did this story as a 2 or 3-parter, they'd have to deal with those issues. So here they didn't have to worry about that. They got a PG rating. They could get away with a lot more stuff. And they got more money to play with. They got $6 million as their budget since it was going to be released as a theatrical feature, and they had a little bit more time to work with, but still not a ton of time, and it was still the core animated series cast and crew. So they didn't have an unlimited budget. They didn't have, again, they couldn't make sure the animation was absolutely frame by frame perfect. They didn't have the production schedule of, say, Disney features at the time, like Beauty and the Beast. This was not, you know, that type of animated production. But honestly, I think that's a good thing because they were able to essentially do what they always do, but, you know, be a bit more relaxed. So they could get more nuance into the story, more texture, more depth. And so, again, this is really the perfect distillation of everything the animated series is. It's a dark, brooding, emotional story about the human side of Batman, but it doesn't neglect the action sequences. It doesn't neglect the humor. This is a truly dark, gripping story, but there's still great jokes and gags and humor layered throughout properly. Like everything in the animated series, it balances the light and the dark sides of the Bat mythos, which is essential for any fully fledged Batman story that feels three-dimensional. This is something that most adaptations truly miss out on, and thus they don't have that sense of being well-rounded. And it's also a beautifully told story, and they only have 76 minutes to play with. So, you know, it would be great if they had more time in terms of, you know, more time to spread the mystery aspects out a little bit more. But it's so efficiently done, and all the performances are so on point because, again, everybody had just come off of doing 65 episodes back to back. So it was a well-oiled machine. But it's here in Mask of the Phantasm where everybody gets to stretch their legs out a little bit after, like, they've been on a long car ride, and you get out at a rest stop and you get to stretch your legs and let the circulation go a little bit and get the creative juices flowing again, because you don't have all those constraints of the TV series. It's just a beautifully made film, and you know, long before we had things like complete series DVD releases, it was the primary way to enjoy the series, unless you were, you know, watching some reruns on television airings. You know, so you're just rewatching this film and the Subzero film that came out a couple years later, just over and over and over again. So that helped to sort of cement it as like the primary thing you think of with the animated series. So that meant we got the VHS release, then we moved on to the Laserdisc, which was letterbox, so that's how you watched the letterboxed theatrical presentation. And it does have Dolby Stereo PCM. This film does have a more nuanced, much more textured, and much more engaging surround mix than any of the TV episodes, which, although they are Dolby Stereo encoded, they're pretty much just stereo oriented. They don't really do much with the center, you know, outside of some dialogue. The surround usage is limited to non-existent, really just more some general ambience and echo. And they also didn't have a lot of time on those, whereas on the film, Bruce Timm has said they worked, you know, like 2 weeks on the audio mix as opposed to like a day or two on an episode mix. It is a very brooding and nuanced mix that I've always enjoyed. I've always felt the impact of the sound design of this film, you know, ever since I first saw it. It's just always stuck with me. And there's a somber quality in the audio that matches the story being told and the environment and the dark deco world that they first created for the TV series, now expanded on in theatrical form. So I think it's very important to maintain that. When you get to the DVD, I have the reissue behind me, and it's a flipper disc. It has both the 4:3 version on one side and nicely has the 1.85 version on the other. Both are based on the same master, done originally for tape and Laserdisc. All of these have a very magenta amber cast to them, so it is a very dated master. The Laserdisc looks pretty good. The DVD shows off a lot more of the flaws. I had the tape growing up. I don't have the VHS tape anymore. Of course, I still wish I had it for nostalgic reasons, I guess. But also, the DVD was very much showing its age, and it had no extras, unfortunately. So it was really great when the Warner Archive debuted their Blu-ray a couple years ago, and it was the strong sales of this Blu-ray that led to Subzero getting done, and then with both of those, we got the official studio label seeing there was desire for Batman the Animated Series, which, of course, it seems like a no-brainer, but they had to get convinced. And so then they did the complete animated series Blu-ray a couple years after that, and then included the Warner Archive disc in that set. So you don't have to get the standalones anymore. So here is the 2017 Blu-ray, which I've kept simply because I've always loved the poster art, and I couldn't bear getting rid of the standalone, even though I have the same disc in the complete series set. So everything matches the DVD perfectly. It's exactly the same for the most part, and the disc label looks pretty good. So no more flipper disc. Unfortunately, this has no extras, which is typical for Warner Archive releases, but the job they did is absolutely first rate. The filmed elements are in beautiful shape. They were cleaned up perfectly. It looks fantastic, and it sounds fantastic too. However, I will admit I still prefer the Laserdisc audio, and that's really more subjective, because when you bring it into Audacity and you're looking at the waveforms, they're pretty much identical. I just think the Laserdisc sound, it's a little bit, it's got a little bit more of the lower end. It's a little bit bassier. It's a little bit more moody in terms of the actual feel of the track. And if you listen very, very closely, the actual dialogue, there is maybe a hint more sibilance here and there on the Blu-ray audio, but that's very, very faint. You really have to split hairs to notice any differences. But if you were to start playing these and you just did an A/B comparison, I think you'll notice the Laserdisc has just a little bit more of a moody atmosphere, simply because it's got more of that low-end ambiance to it. Again, all three versions sound fantastic. The Laserdisc, the DVD, the Blu-ray, they're all pretty much the same, but I do notice a slight difference that still makes me prefer the LD audio. And it may be just because I'm so used to watching the Laserdisc, which I've done for years. Once I got the DVD, then eventually I got the LD, and I just switched to watching that every year. And then I started watching the Blu-ray. The big draw is the new transfer and the fact that they included both ratios. So you're able to select the ratio at the beginning. If you select the 1:3:3 ratio, it comes up with a text screen explaining, as I did before, the original concept was this was going to be 1:3:3 on VHS tape as the direct-to-video, and then got the theatrical bump, which is why they had to mat it for 1:8:5. So really, from an archival standpoint, you need both versions. Technically, the 1:3:3 is the intended original idea they had, and the 1:8:5 was a secondary thing, but then the 1:8:5 became the primary version because it was being shown in theaters. So it's great to have both, and some fans prefer 1:3:3, some fans prefer 1:8:5. I think there's positives to both, but I always wind up watching the 1:8:5 because it's the version I'm most used to, even though you can tell there are a handful of shots that are definitely too cramped. But for the most part, you get more theatrical grandeur, and that goes well with the more robust and more nuanced Dolby Stereo mix as compared to, say, watching any episodes from Season 1 in 4:3 in just plain stereo. All versions include the theatrical trailer, but unfortunately none include the vintage HBO First Look featurette, where they talk to some of the cast and crew while they were making the film, and it's really one of the few vintage pieces that exists in terms of extras for Batman the Animated Series in general. So you can watch it on YouTube, and I'll link to it in the description, but unfortunately that's never been included on any release. So this is pretty much bare bones, of course, like most Warner Archive discs. So there's really not much else to say about the Blu-ray disc release itself, except for the fact that you can get this exact same disc replicated in the complete series. So it's not necessary to have the standalone version anymore, but I just couldn't help but hang on to it because I'm such a huge fan of the film and the series, and it just looks great on a Blu-ray case. It felt like real vindication getting this on Blu-ray, a brand new transfer from the archive, and of course by all of us buying it immediately and it's selling out, that showed the studio that there was interest in the animated series, and that's how we finally got the complete series Blu-ray. The only bad part is, Warner Archive didn't do the complete series. So unfortunately, the series release doesn't have the same attention to care and detail that the two feature Blu-rays got. These have beautiful encoding jobs. They're maxed out disc transfers. Phantasm has both ratios. The cleanup job is first rate. The color timing, the sound, everything. And then you get to the complete series where there are a number of issues and the compression is nowhere near as good. They put too many episodes on too few discs. And because these two discs are included at the end, Phantasm and Subzero, you put those on after watching through the series and it's a night and day difference. So it really shows the difference between the Warner Brothers Studio label that cuts costs and doesn't do very good encoding jobs and can introduce errors because they're just rushing through things, as opposed to the Warner Archive that does films and releases on a title by title basis and always does excellent jobs with their encoding and with maxed out bit rates, and really had to take a lot of time and care to clean up this film properly. So I wish there was more information about the restoration process. I had to glean stuff from a lot of Comic-Con panels and interviews, but it's a film I've forever been fascinated with, and again, this is, I think, without question, the best and the truly great Batman film, the definitive Batman film, I would argue. Nothing else has come close to it before or since, and I love some of the other Batman films. I love the original 4 Bat films. I love the Batman 1966 feature. I'm a huge Batman nerd, but any real diehard Batman fan will tell you this, along with the animated series, but Phantasm in particular, because it's a distillation of everything the animated series tried to do. Mask of the Phantasm is the definitive Batman film to date because it is the film that so perfectly replicates the Bat mythos, the Batman character, the human side with the adventure side, the heroic side with the more nuanced and textured side. It brings reality in elements into a very film noir-laden world. This is a film ostensibly intended for children that took its primary influences from Citizen Kane, and also I'd argue, there's a lot of Hitchcock in here, but there's also a lot of great film noirs because this film is very much a flashback-oriented film. So it has a very dreamlike feel that harkens back to classics of the genre like Laura and especially the masterpiece Out of the Past. So not the typical thing you expect from a comic book superhero film, and especially one that was originally intended as a direct-to-video film that was going to be sold to children. So this is a film that kids can see. That they may not, get everything going on at a very young age, but it's something that will never leave them. It never leaves the mind. It is an emotional experience just as it is a Batman experience, and that makes it all the more special because, again, this is the perfect distillation of the entirety of Batman the Animated Series. Now, there is one note I would like to make about this release that has always bugged me. If you look closely at the poster art, this is the original one-sheet art with the modern DC logo on the top. So it's very, very classical, looks nice. However, if you look closely at the color, you'll notice there's a particular issue. You can see the Laserdisc behind me, but I'll grab the DVD. So originally the DVD was a snapper case. This is the later Keep case reissue, but as you can see very obviously, the Blu-ray has made it even more blue. So it has a bit of the, what everybody likes to call teal coloring creeping into the art. So I've seen that on most of the modern reprints of the poster, and they did do a limited theatrical showing of Phantasm when the Blu-ray came out, and those posters had this same sort of blue look to it. So yeah, that's something you'll notice off the bat. So that, and I think the Laserdisc audio is a tad better. I just wind up preferring it. I know most people aren't going to probably notice a difference, but that's just something my ears immediately picked up on. But outside of that, again, the blue is also different on the back imagery, so you can see there very clearly. The original is much more blue. The new one has much more of a teal sort of feel to it. So that is my review of the Warner Archive Mask of the Phantasm Blu-ray. It's an essential disc to have. This is the great Batman film, period. But of course, if you get the essential complete series release, even with its drawbacks, you do get both Warner Archive feature discs included. So you don't have to get the standalone. most of us bought them beforehand, this and Subzero. So I just couldn't bear to get rid of it. So that's why I've still got the standalone version. I felt this needed a separate release. I'm going to do a separate review for Subzero as well, but I will also be doing a review of the complete series box set, and I'll be going over all the various issues and drawbacks in that set. But until that time, I want to thank you ever so much for watching. Please leave any comments about the animated series or Mask of the Phantasm you have. I'm always happy to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, keep physical media alive, keep your disc spinning.
Can't be too careful with all those weirdos around. Tisk, tisk. And to think our tax dollars go to pay those bozos. The extras features may not be much, but it's been that kind of day.